I intend to make the best of it, of course. I am a good woman, I hope, and I know my duty." Nancy colored hotly. "Of course, ma'am. It was only that I thought a little girl here might brighten things up for you," she faltered. "Thank you," rejoined the lady dryly. "I can't say, however, that I see any immediate need for that." "But of course you'd want her, your sister's child," ventured Nancy, vaguely feeling that somehow she must prepare a welcome for this lonely little stranger. Miss Polly lifted her chin haughtily. "Well, really, Nancy, just because I happen to have a sister who was silly enough to marry and bring unnecessary children into a world that was already quite full enough, I can't see how I should particularly want to have the care of them myself. However, as I said before, I hope I know my duty. See that you clean the corners, Nancy," she finished sharply as she left the room. "Yes, ma'am," sighed Nancy, picking up the half-dried pitcher, now so cold it must be rinsed again. In her own room, Miss Polly took out once more the letter which she had received 2 days before from the faraway western town, and which had been so unpleasant a surprise to her. The letter was addressed to Miss Polly Harrington, Beldingsville, Vermont, and it read as follows. "Dear Madam, I regret to inform you that the Reverend John Whittier died 2 weeks ago, leaving one child, a girl 11 years old. He left practically nothing else save a few books, for as you doubtless know, he was the pastor of this small mission church and had a very meager salary. I believe he was your deceased sister's husband, but he gave me to understand the families were not on the best of terms. He thought, however, that for your sister's sake you might wish to take the child and bring her up among her own people in the East. Hence I am writing to you. The little girl will be all ready to start by the time you get this letter, and if you can take her we would appreciate it very much if you would write that she might come at once, as there is a man and his wife here who are going East very soon, and they would take her with them to Boston and put her on the Beldingsville train. Of course, you would be notified what day and train to expect Pollyanna on. Hoping to hear favorably from you soon, I remain, respectfully yours, Jeremiah O. White." With a frown, Miss Polly folded the letter and tucked it into its envelope. She had answered it the day before, and she had said she would take the child, of course. She hoped she knew her duty well enough for that, disagreeable as the task would be. As she sat now with the letter in her hands, her thoughts went back to her sister, Jenny, who had been this child's mother, and to the time when Jenny, as a girl of 20, had insisted upon marrying the young minister in spite of her family's remonstrances. There had been a man of wealth who had wanted her, and the family had much preferred him to the minister, but Jenny did not. The man of wealth had more years as well as more money to his credit, while the minister had only a young head full of youth's ideals and enthusiasm, and a heart full of love. Jenny had preferred these, quite naturally perhaps, so she had married the minister and had gone south with him as a home missionary's wife. The break had come then. Miss Polly remembered it well, though she had been but a girl of 15, the youngest at the time. The family had had little more to do with the missionary's wife. To be sure, Jenny herself had written for a time, and had named her last baby Pollyanna for her 2 sisters, Polly and Anna. The other babies had all died. This had been the last time that Jenny had written, and in a few years there had come the news of her death, told in a short but heartbroken little note from the minister himself, dated at a little town in the West. Meanwhile, time had not stood still for the occupants of the great house on the hill. Miss Polly, looking out at the far-reaching valley below, thought of the changes those 25 years had brought to her. She was 40 now, and quite alone in the world. Father, mother, sisters, all were dead. For years now she had been sole mistress of the house and of the thousands left her by her father. There were people who had openly pitied her lonely life, and who had urged her to have some friend or companion to live with her. But she had not welcomed either their sympathy or their advice. She was not lonely, she said. She liked being by herself. She preferred quiet. But now... Miss Polly rose with frowning face and closely shut lips. She was glad, of course, that she was a good woman, and that she not only knew her duty, but had sufficient strength of character to perform it. But Pollyanna, what a ridiculous name! Chapter 2. Old Tom and Nancy. In the little attic room Nancy swept and scrubbed vigorously, paying particular attention to the corners. There were times, indeed, when the vigor she put into her work was more of a relief to her feelings than it was an ardor to efface dirt. Nancy, in spite of her frightened submission to her mistress, was no saint. "I just wish I could dig out the corners of her soul," she muttered jerkily, punctuating her words with murderous jabs of her pointed cleaning stick. "There's plenty of 'em needs cleanin' all right, all right. The idea of sticking that blessed child way off up here in this hot little room, with no fire in the winter, too, and all this big house to pick and choose from. Unnecessary children, indeed. Humph!" snapped Nancy, wringing her rag so hard her fingers ached from the strain. "I guess it ain't children what is most unnecessary just now. For some time she worked in silence. Then, her task finished, she looked about the bare little room in plain disgust. "Well, it's done, my part anyhow," she sighed. "There ain't no dirt here, and there's mighty little else. Poor little soul, a pretty place this is to put a homesick, lonesome child into," she finished, going out and closing the door with a bang. "Oh!" she ejaculated, biting her lip. Then, doggedly, "Well, I don't care. I hope she did hear the bang. I do. In the garden that afternoon, Nancy found a few minutes in which to interview old Tom, who had pulled the weeds and shoveled the paths about the place for uncounted years. "Mr. Tom," began Nancy, throwing a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure she was unobserved, "did you know a little girl was comin' here to live with Miss Polly?" "A what?" demanded the old man, straightening his bent back with difficulty. "A little girl to live with Miss Polly." "Go on with your jokin'," scoffed unbelieving Tom. "Why don't you tell me the sun is a-goin' to set in the east tomorrow?" "But it's true. She told me herself," maintained Nancy. "It's her niece, and she's 11 years old." The man's jaw fell. "Sho! I wonder now," he muttered. Then a tender light came into his faded eyes. "It ain't, but it must be, Miss Jenny's little gal. There wasn't none of the rest of 'em married. Why, Nancy, it must be Miss Jenny's little gal. Glory be to praise, to think of my old eyes a-seein' this." "Who was Miss Jenny?" "She was an angel straight out of heaven," breathed the man fervently. "But the old master and missus knew her as their oldest daughter. She was 20 when she married and went away from here long years ago. Her babies all died, I heard, except the last one, and that must be the one what's a-comin'." "She's 11 years old." "Yes, she might be," nodded the old man. "And she's goin' to sleep in the attic, more shame to her," scolded Nancy, with another glance over her shoulder toward the house behind her. Old Tom frowned. The next moment a curious smile curved his lips. "I'm a-wonderin' what Miss Polly will do with a child in the house," he said. "Humph! Well, I'm a-wonderin' what a child will do with Miss Polly in the house," snapped Nancy. The old man laughed. "I'm afraid you ain't fond of Miss Polly." He grinned. "As if ever anybody could be fond of her," scorned Nancy. Old Tom smiled oddly. He stooped and began to work again. "I guess maybe you didn't know about Miss Polly's love affair," he said slowly. "Love affair? Her? No. And I guess nobody else did, neither." "Oh, yes, they did," nodded the old man. "And the feller's livin' today, right in this town, too." "Who is he?" "I ain't a-tellin' that. It ain't fit that I should." The old man drew himself erect. In his dim blue eyes, as he faced the house, there was the loyal servant's honest pride in the family he has served and loved for long years. "But it don't seem possible, her and a lover," still maintained Nancy. Old Tom shook his head. "You didn't know Miss Polly as I did," he argued. "She used to be real handsome, and she would be now if she'd let herself be." "Handsome? Miss Polly?" "Yes, if she'd just let that tight hair of hern all out loose and careless like, as it used to be. and wear the sort of bunnets with